Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's jump right in. Today, we are exploring a truly breathtaking piece of source material called The Emptiness that Overflows. It's this fascinating blend of deep philosophy and fiction that literally takes some of the greatest spiritual minds in human history, locks them in a room together, and just lets them argue about the very nature of existence. So if you love structured, mind-bending thought experiments that really challenge how you view reality, you are in exactly the right place. Let's get into it.
I mean, it sounds exactly like the setup to a punchline, doesn't it? What happens when a Christian mystic, a Sufi poet, and a Taoist sage walk into a bar? But believe it or not, this incredible what-if is the core premise that kicks off our entire journey today. The source material basically engineers this impossible meeting across centuries and continents just to push the limits of language and uncover what actually lies underneath it all.
Section 1, 3 Men, 1 Tavern, The Impossible Meeting. So, our setting is this quiet little tavern in a nameless, timeless city, run by a very unnervingly observant tavern-keeper. And our first guest to arrive is the legendary 13th century Persian poet and Sufi mystic Jalal al-Din Muhammad Rūmī. And he enters weeping. He brings this immense longing and spiritual intoxication to the table. You see, for Rūmī, the pain of separation from the divine is actually the very path back to it. He views the entire universe through this intense lens of burning, ecstatic love. Then, stepping in right after him, we have Meister Eckhart, the 14th century Dominican theologian. And this is a stark contrast to Rūmī's weeping passion. Eckhart arrives in profound, disciplined silence. This guy's teachings were so radical that his own church actually condemned him after his death. He's someone who spent 60 years relentlessly stripping away every concept, every image, every single name for God, just to find that absolute, unconditioned ground underneath. And finally, we've got Zhuangzi. This ancient Chinese Taoist philosopher doesn't even bother walking through the door, he just kind of appears at the table. And he brings this incredible aura of joyful spontaneity. Zhuangzi really isn't interested in theological heavy lifting or weeping for the divine. Instead, he brings a profound, practical lightness to the group, effortlessly cutting straight to the truth like a master butcher. Section 2. The Metaphor of the Cup, Defining the Divine. So, picture our 3 brilliant minds seated around a table when this massive intellectual debate erupts over the most ordinary thing sitting right in front of them, an empty cup. Eckhart makes his crucial point using the specific German word, Abgeschiedenheit, basically complete detachment. Eckhart argues that a cup is defined entirely by what it lacks, its emptiness. He believes the human soul has to become perfectly empty, totally stripped of ego and desires, to become a clean enough vessel to actually receive the divine. For him, absolute readiness is the ultimate spiritual state. You can really feel the tension building here. Eckhart is laser-focused on the structural necessity of the empty cup. Pure preparation, right? But Rūmī passionately pushes back. For him, it is all about the divine wine. I mean, what good is a perfectly empty cup if you aren't going to fill it to the absolute brim with the intoxicating, ecstatic rush of divine love? And Rūmī pushes this metaphor even further with the concept of fana, annihilation. He argues that when that divine wine finally pours in, the cup doesn't just passively hold it, it is utterly transformed. In this ecstatic state of union, all the boundaries just dissolve. The cup completely forgets that it was ever just a lump of clay, and it merges entirely with what fills it. Now, Zhuangzi, he builds on this entirely sideways. He tells them a story about a butcher named Cook Ding. Cook Ding's cleaver never actually dulls, because it never hits bone. It simply finds the natural empty spaces in the ox's joints. He's working with his mind, not his senses. Zhuangzi is pointing out that in a state of perfect action, there is no separate self doing the work. The cook, the cleaver, the ox, they all become one seamless event. There's no need to stress about the cup or the wine. Section 3. The Edge of Language, the Fourth Presence. Well, as the night deepens and the fire starts burning low, these 3 linguistic masters hit a wall. They begin to realize something incredibly profound. Their brilliant metaphors are actually breaking down at the absolute limits of human speech. Eckhart realizes it first, and Rūmī totally agrees. They'd been passionately debating the wine, the cup, the burning, the cutting, but these are all just descriptions of the approach. They have been arguing fiercely about the road, mistaking it for the destination itself. Eckhart calls this ultimate, unsayable destination the Gottheit, or the Godhead. And this is a radically huge idea. He's not talking about a creator God you can just name or pray to. He is talking about the absolute, unconditioned ground of reality that exists prior to any creation. It is so fundamental that even applying the word is to it falls short. It's literally the blank page before the first word is ever written. Zhuangzi is just sitting there smiling at this, because this perfectly mirrors the Tao, the way. Just like Eckhart's Godheit, the Tao is the undivided reality before the universe was chopped up into the 10,000 things. It is that effortless flow prior to any naming or dividing or defining. Because, as Zhuangzi knows, the very moment you try to name the nameless, boom, you've already dropped it in a box. Section 4. The Tavern-keeper's Answer. Action over words. At this point, the men have completely, totally exhausted their vocabularies. And it is at this exact moment that the silent tavern keeper, the guy who has just been working quietly in the background all night, finally takes center stage. But he doesn't give a speech. Instead, he performs a perfectly sequential physical action. He takes a cup, he pours the wine, he drinks it down in one continuous draught, and then he calmly takes his cloth and wipes the bar clean in a long, slow arc. With just this one fluid motion, he utterly shatters their massive intellectual debate. What the tavern keeper does perfectly embodies the Taoist principles of Wu Wei and Ziran, effortless action and pure naturalness. He was the empty cup, he received the wine, he drank, and then he returned right back to emptiness. He did his job so fully, so completely naturally, that there was no ego or performance left over to observe it. He was simply being the tavern keeper. And that brings us to the ultimate, mind-blowing takeaway of their night. The extraordinary is the ordinary, worn inside out. True enlightenment isn't actually found in some mystical flight out of your body or in writing a 25,000-verse epic poem. It's actually found in perfect, unpretentious presence during the most mundane tasks: washing the dishes, wiping the bar. Section 5. The Return to Ordinary Life. After the Tavern. Morning light finally creeps into the nameless city. The arguments are settled, and these mystics have to do what all of us eventually have to do: return to the real world. Rūmī calls this return baqa, which means subsistence, because after that mind-shattering encounter with the divine, you do have to come back to your everyday life. But here's the catch: you don't come back the same. You move forward as that clay cup, permanently and fundamentally altered by the sheer fact that you have held the divine wine. Just before they leave, Rūmī writes one final poem, and the message is an absolute masterpiece. He writes, "The tavern has no door that opens from outside. You are already in it when you discover the door. The sacred ground, the Tao, the Gottheit, it was never actually a destination you had to travel to. It is the very ground you have been standing on your entire life. The seeking is the finding." So the crucial question I want to leave you with today is this: how can you bring this perfect, unpretentious presence to the ordinary actions of your everyday life? You really don't need to be a 13th century mystic to find the profound. You just have to pour the coffee, wipe the counter, and be completely, totally there while you do it. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I really hope you look at your next empty cup just a little differently.